Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and this was a bit of a surprise video for me today. So, Rudy Gobert signed a new long-term extension with the Utah Jazz. This has a lot of different angles. We're going to talk about every single one of them, but that's the headliner here, is that Rudy Gobert has signed a new contract. He's seemingly going to be a member of the Jazz for the next 4 to 5 years, and we're going to talk about what this means for Utah specifically for that summer of 2021 free agency class as a whole. And what else this could potentially mean for Utah moving forward as well. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, all throughout the NBA offseason. So it's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the videos as well. Helps me out a ton. Lets me know that you're enjoying this piece of content and helps it get out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen, which are in a link tree down in the description below. But with those things said, let's talk about Rudy Gobert. So there have been some rumors over the last handful of days about what Utah is trying to do with Rudy Gobert. They offered him a regular max contract a handful of days ago, and he said no because he wants the supermax. And now he has agreed to a new 5-year, $205 million extension, which is not the full supermax. That full supermax is the number that Giannis got the other day, which is 5 years, $228. So it's not quite all the way up there, but it is a hugely significant number. This is a lot of money for Rudy Gobert specifically, or for any player. And this locks in him and Donovan Mitchell to be the two cornerstones of the franchise for the next 4 or 5 years. Him and Mitchell are both going to be on the payroll for over $80 million or close to it for the next 4 to 5 years. And that means a lot of things for Utah. So we'll talk about Gobert specifically. We'll talk about him as a player, the contract, and then kind of the long-term outlook here for Utah. So Gobert has been a bit of a polarizing player, as someone that has earned this reputation as a great defender and a great rim protector. And that's definitely true. From a rim protection standpoint, Rudy Gobert is a defensive player of the year caliber guy, and it's the reason why he's been in the running for the award a handful of times. However, specifically in the postseason against teams that like to go smaller, Gobert has certainly had his issues and his struggles, and that has called into question his value in general at a position, at the center position in the league that value is already kind of called into question anyway, right? People already are kind of thinking, is it worth it to pay a offensive focal point center the money that Gobert just got paid when you can pay other guys to do like 70% of that for not very much money? The center position, you can get quality starters for not a lot of money, or you can pay guys like Gobert a ton of money and wonder if the value is really there to pay all that much for Gobert. So that's been kind of the conversation about Rudy Gobert for the last handful of years, is he's great in the regular season, but certain matchups aren't great for him in the postseason. Do you really want to pay someone like that as much money as Utah just committed to him? So that answer for me was always no. I understand the value of Rudy Gobert and I understand what he does well, but I also understand that you only get, a few guys that you can pay this level of money to. And I want to pay guys that have versatility or that are like offensive focal points. And Rudy Gobert just isn't that. He doesn't provide versatility. It's not that he can only do one thing well. It's just that you have to build a lot of the things that you do defensively around Rudy Gobert. And then once that system doesn't work against other teams that are going smaller, it becomes an issue. And like offensively, he's just not someone that I want to pay $40 million a year to. He's fine. He can score around the rim. He's worked on his game in terms of finishing, in terms of being a better role man. But Rudy Gobert as an offensive player isn't that much better than centers that are making, $7 or $8 million a year this year. So is the defensive difference that Gobert makes for your team worth an extra $32 million a year? For me personally, it's not. So this idea of paying Gobert the supermax or even the max was always something that I called into a bit of question. And I understand that Utah is in a situation where they want to make sure that their team is good. They signed Donovan Mitchell to this huge extension, and there's no point in having him be making $30 million a year if the rest of the team isn't good. And so at a certain level, they almost had to bring back Gobert. I would have, not been surprised if they had, had some exploratory trade talks about Gobert, about possible sign and trade. But they decided, obviously, that ultimately having Rudy Gobert on the roster on what is an overpay for me is a better idea than either losing him for nothing or changing the entire makeup of this roster. And I guess they think Rudy Gobert is the right move to keep him there. So what this means now for the summer of 2021 is that there's just another name off the list, right? Gobert is someone that I talked about in recent videos, and I plan on talking about him coming up as well as a possible trade guy, and just him potentially going somewhere like Dallas or being a key free agent in the summer 2021, let's say, being someone that teams are planning on or semi-excited about going to get, and that's just not going to be the case anymore now that he is under contract. Just another name crossed off the list of a rapidly shrinking 2021 NBA free agency class. So for the Jazz in the long term, this definitely locks up a good amount of their money. Joe Ingles will still be looking for a new contract. Mike Conley will be off the books after this season. And so the issue for me in terms of the long-term outlook is outside of Gobert and Mitchell, who still have upside, Mitchell specifically, where does the growth for this roster come from? Is there a big trade they could potentially make down the road and they just cash in all their draft picks? Is there an unknown player on this roster that you think is suddenly going to be really, really good? Is there a situation in which you think that cap space will open up, even with these two huge contracts on the books, to the point where you can go out and get, a steal in a particular offseason for $10 to $15 million a year? That is my issue with teams like Utah bringing in players like Gobert that I think you're overpaying, because you're overpaying them to not be a contender. I'm okay with overpays if you're a team like Charlotte, for example, that needs to get somebody, and you can't just continually be a 30-win team and you go out and overpay someone because you're the Hornets and you have to get people to show up there. I'm okay with an overpay in that situation, and I'm also okay with an overpay in a situation in which you're a true contender and you don't want to lose someone like Gobert. Maybe I'm off base here, and maybe people think that the Utah Jazz are a real contender. I don't think that's the case unless Mike Conley is outstanding this year and Joe Ingles is really, really good as well. I think they're just outside of contender status. So maybe it's worth it. But for me, at the end of the day, the headline here is that this is an overpay for Rudy Gobert. And I think there's a scenario where in a couple of years, we're looking at their payroll and we're thinking, okay, they've got Mitchell, they've got Gobert. Some of the other guys have kind of, fallen off either because of age or because they're not on the roster anymore. And you're looking at that Gobert contract like, how much is he really raising the ceiling of our team? I'm not saying it's going to be a huge disaster, but I think there's a scenario in which we look back on this as a pretty significant mistake for Utah, where they could have moved Gobert if other teams were interested, or potentially looked at the sign and trade. I understand what it would have meant if Gobert had just left in free agency in 2021, and that's a huge hole in this roster, and it doesn't necessarily open up cap space for them because they've got, Bogdanovich on the roster and Conley, who they would ideally like to re-sign, and they had so many different things in the air already for the 2021 offseason, whether it be Ingles or Conley or Gobert. So I understand just wanting to lock up somebody and then moving on, and maybe at the end of the day, this is the move that they had to make, but I think it's more likely that 3 years from now, we're looking at this and thinking, man, Rudy Gobert is making $40 million. That is a tough contract. Rather than sitting here thinking, man, it's a really good thing Utah brought back Rudy Gobert, and now they're championship contenders with him, Mitchell, and whoever else they still have on the roster. So when you think about it from that perspective, the probability of it being a mistake or it being a good idea, I think it's much more likely that it's a mistake. I don't know what other options they had here. Obviously, they tried to negotiate this number down a little bit and were unable to. And I wouldn't imagine the trade market would have been that extensive, given he is a 2021 free agent. And so maybe they just backed themselves in the corner and realized this was the move that they had to make. And sometimes that's how it goes for NBA teams. Congrats to Rudy Gobert for getting his money. But if I'm a Utah fan, I'm nervous about what this means for the long-term flexibility and future of the team, in terms of this potentially being a pretty bad contract here in the next couple of years for a big guy that is great defensively, but is limited in what he can do defensively, and offensively is not going to be a huge difference maker for you. So for me, that's where I'm at with the Gobert thing. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say down in the comment section below. But like I said, I would be nervous if I was a Jazz fan. I think this is definitely an overpay. But that is going to be the end of the first video of the day. You guys can also check out the second video that'll be coming up later today, which is my power forward player rankings. I've been doing that series over the last couple of days. You guys can check that out as well. With all those things said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you missed any of my previous videos, you can check out the boxes on screen as well. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.